Hey you guys, Mickey here again, out of Inwood Eden, and one of the aspects of this project, this property, are bees. Bees are a big part of the garden and the ecosystem itself. So today's video we're just going to get into a hive. We're right on the beginning of our fall flow, so we kind of talked about that, but what it basically means is that the weather is cooling. We're just past the equinox, and the equinox signals so many plants to flower, that change in the light level. And so the bees are getting very busy. If you guys look over there, so this is kind of a bee yard area, but there's a hive that is strong. So this hive has enough bees to bring in the flow, and this one we're going to harvest honey from this season. So it's got a lot of activity today. You'll see the bees fanning it, doing a lot of cooling, a lot of stuff like that. These are empty, in case you're wondering. This one that we're going to get into is not as active. This is one that probably has struggled. I do a lot of hands-off beekeeping, which basically means I just get to observe the challenges that they face. So I'm kind of excited to get into this one. If you want to come around and see the lower level at the entrance. So, and essentially, this one might be one to see when things go wrong. So just a few bees here, and they have a top entrance up here, if you look up this way, and hardly any activity. So we're going to open it up, be very candid with this video, and see what's going on. So when you're smoking bees, it just takes a little puff in the entrance, and then you'll kind of hear the whole colony, because this is the organism. The colony is the organism. You're going to hear the colony respond to it, and that's usually enough. It's helpful when there are a lot of bees, so you can kind of see the activity change, but it's really easy to over smoke them, so that's what we don't want to do. And then it's also good to let that information spread throughout the colony. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up under here, and we're going to crack the lid, and right about where a bee would pop out its head, we're going to let some smoke drift in. And I heard the response there, so it heard that, and then give it a second. And now the smoker, it goes far away. It goes, we don't need any more smoke than that. Too much smoke really can mess things up. So if I'm in a rush, I count to 10. At least that's like a little bit of waiting. And now that smoke that was in there, it got communicated to everybody, and now we're gonna see what we got inside. I do not talk when I'm working my bees, so this will be the big difference today if we see some changes. So this comb on the top there, that's old. That's not something that is signaling anything to me. So whenever you are working the bees, it's good to keep the equipment and everything nearby, so that the bees can kind of feel connected, because they're really all part of one organism. So this cluster of bees, if you guys want to come in, we're fine. There's smoke, and there's a lot of indicators. These guys are all corralling some hive beetle, that kind of activity, right in a little pocket right there. The beetles have just run out, so I don't think we'll get to see it. But this thing is empty, or it feels pretty empty. There's lines. It's not where it's at. So either it swarmed, because again, I'm not on them too hard, or it's had some pressure. Why don't I open it up, and then we'll get a better look inside. So this is a good tool, a frame rest, and what it allows you to do is keep the bees closer together. So whenever you do lift frames, like here, it doesn't matter. I'm not even actually going to use it, because this is empty on the outside. The story behind this colony. So it was a removal last spring, and it basically just never caught its footing. A lot of beekeeping is like the momentum of the colony, and this one just never had a lot of momentum, so it kind of sat. And then we're just coming off of the summer dearth, so things slow down a lot in the summer. So I put on the extra box. There were more bees, so that's why I'm thinking they might have swarmed. It felt appropriate at the time to add some frames, and a lot of it is also frames because there were so many bees from removals. Usually there's this massive quantity, but this is very thin coverage, and there's a little bit of, actually looks like honey that they've uncapped. So this might have been, you know, a spring flow honey capping that's getting uncapped to help them make it through whatever they're going through, because it's much darker in there. And really we're not going to get a lot from the top because it's so thin, so we're just going to skip this box. Let me just check the middle frame, because that's where sometimes the queen can come up and lay eggs, but I doubt it. But I think this is mostly honey that they put away back in May. There's a big flow. There's actually a flow in June too, but what's that weedy tree, chicken tree, Chinese tallow. The Chinese tallow makes a ton of nectar, and so the bees put that away for later. These might be connected. But yeah, you can notice that, well, the whole protective gear thing, it's a blessing and a curse. So I had to break some comb there, and I'm listening for where the colony's at. This is a good sign, because this right here, this white stuff, this is brand new drawn comb. So this might even be the start of our flow, because we are on the start of a flow. And right here they're starting to cross comb. So you want to keep your comb as straight as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that a little bit. And encourage them to live within their legal system. I mean, my frames. Even though I smashed some of that, they'll be able to rework their wax. They can chew on it and fix that. But in the end, sometimes it's best to just let them do what they can. If you can tolerate it, you know, the verdict's out basically on whether it's not. If you always cut off the burr comb, then you'll end up always cutting off burr comb, because sometimes the bees just want to do it. So there's one more frame, and then we'll get to the bottom box where we might find the queen. And that's this one, because from looking in I could see that there was a little more activity and older comb here. So if there was going to be eggs anywhere in this frame. So we didn't really see a lot of beetles. They've connected the frame on the bottom with some burr comb, and that's because I don't go into these hives very much at all. So I might have to, oh, I got it. I have another hive tool that's better for breaking them upward. So this has got just honey. It's basically full of honey. I don't know, oh, there's a shadow. So it's heavy with honey. These are good signs, just very few bees. So I think it looks like we might have lost bees to a swarm, and that is okay, it happens. So let me push these back together. Whenever you're, I guess this is kind of a beekeeping video, really important to make sure your frames are smashed as tight together, you know, as you can this way. One, for consistency, you know, for a bee, the change in that spacing, that could be a lot, you know, if you think about it, their scale, and all of a sudden it's like, you know, 1/4 of an inch farther apart. So they have their preferences, and allowing them to manage them can be really helpful. So anyway, the move is basically a hand or a hive tool at either end, and then pry them back together and pry them back together, because the propolis, all this sticky stuff around the edge, the, you know, sap and resin things, that will slowly make them frames wider apart. So now we're going to go into the bottom box, and Jordan, if you grab that white tub, I'm going to put this box, keep it off the ground. Ideally you have your own system. I have these white tubs with lids that are kind of like my stands. And will give us some place to put it that's nearby. So what I saw from being that this was 60% full of honey, the other frames looked about the same. I can add, because we're just about to come into flow, even though there are a few bees, I would add one super, unless we see very, very few bees. We would add space now, because they're drawing comb, and hopefully there are even more bees underneath. But notice how nice these bees are. And all the bees out at Inwood Eden came from wild populations, basically removals that needed a new home. So, there we go. Now, being separated, this will upset the colony. This is, you know, where the energy will change, and I might step over and grab the smoker or keep it nearby. But as long as the bees are focused on the task at hand, so we have a lot of cross comb. Yeah, I'm gonna bring the smoker just because I know what's coming. Pushing limits, right? And also thinking of my videographers. All of us are not wearing equipment. So when you're smoking the bees, this is smoking the bees. You know, you don't have to burn them physically in order to make things, you know, go better for you. Just keep them focused on the task at hand. And a great way is, if you're a beekeeper, as you move your hand over, look how little attention my hand is getting. If my hand is getting attention, or if we get the bees lined up, like looking right at this point, like those guys are doing, if all of the bees start looking like that, it's basically the collective consciousness is shifting. You know, it's kind of like what's happening in America right now. And then it's time as a beekeeper, you know, you gotta smoke them. I call it, I false flag them, but you know, something like that. I'm getting snarky, sorry. But anyway, I'm gonna probably break some comb, just because this is like that kind of stuff. And camera person, you're fine, but stay out of there. Like, don't, you know, push it in there. But yeah, this is a good sign, because looking between these frames, which you guys can't really see, but there are a lot of bees, which means we're going into this colony to basically make sure that they're not close to swarming, and that we can see eggs, and that's enough. And then we're just going to put on another super and wait for the goldenrod to fill it up. So here, they're already bringing in nectar. That's not as dark, it's a little bit lighter in my hand. And bees hate to draw wax on plastic. They loathe it. So that's something I've been learning. I started out buying the plastic foundation, which is like wax coated. It's really hard. Like, it has to be in the beginning of the flow, and it has to be really like clean wax, like the roaches can't walk on it at all, because that happens out here if I don't put it in right away. So we'll go through this whole thing. It's still pretty well organized, and maybe we'll get to see the queen. That'll be fun, if the battery on the camera holds up. So notice I'm being slow and deliberate. The energy of my voice is all for the bees. So here's a light one. When you're beekeeping, you have to keep this oriented a certain way. So this is full of larvae. If you want to come around, because the sun's going to maybe be in it that way, let's see if you can't put it real close, because there's big larvae all through this. So a full frame of larvae. And then let's check the other side. I'm going to spin it around, you stay there. I didn't even see what's in those cells, so here, let me take a look. And I will. Oh yeah, big larva. Cool. So the orientation that you hold it at is important, because especially, you know, heavy with honey, if you hold it parallel to the ground, it's a big no-no. Hi, ladies. We're going through. So you don't need to see the queen. That's a huge thing. You might want to check every frame if you're really worried about stopping a swarm, but if you see eggs, that's the same as seeing a queen. You know, it's 3 days until the eggs hatch, and so it's not always worth it to go through. Like I'm hands off with these bees. We got cap larvae, and we've got empty cells. So it's not a good pattern. Let me look at my side and then you can get the other side. We'll switch. So the pattern is showing that the queen, basically, they didn't give her a nice open space. They started putting honey and other things in there, which it just depends on each individual colony. But for a beekeeper, they usually want really clean pattern. I guess it's just easier to see or to manage, but also it's a sign of getting honey bound. So if the bees, the colony itself, goes and fills in all of those good laying cells with pollen or nectar, then the queen has nowhere to lay, and it can throw off the colony. Because again, this is a collective thing, superorganism. They got to be in tune with each other. And still, no need for any smoke. There's not even, I mean, it's 6 feet away. All right. Queen time. All right, you guys, she's in the middle of this frame with a blue dot. I put a mark on her. Do you see her? Down at the bottom, near the bottom? All right, quick peek, and then she's going back in. You got her? All right. And there's actually one more quick check. I'm sorry. There is a queen cup. That's empty. Good. Okay. So she's going back in. Hopefully that wasn't her that fell in. But there's a queen cup there. So they are. Oh, I see her. She's right there. It's not a bad thing to leave queen cup. I mean, you smash them, they can just go right back. Essentially, queen is still in the hive. That queen cup looks fresh. I could have showed it to you. They're just bigger cells that kind of droop down. Didn't have an egg in it. And so, for me, that's enough information. I was looking for queen or eggs, and I was looking for presence or absence of a swarm. And rather than go through all of these frames, which would probably show you more of the same, basically not a great pattern. The queens, you know, they're not giving her great space, but so she's having to run around and find her little holes for laying. But I don't think that they're swarming because we're not seeing the drones. We're not, there were still some empty cells on that second frame. So whenever I'm in doubt, I do nothing. I think that's the bigger thing, because you know, I do have a good mentor in Shelly Rice here in Houston, and she's been awesome, but sometimes it's like there is no right answer. You just have to make a judgment call. So my judgment call is close it up. We're done. This can get some space on top, because the super that's on is already a little full, and what I might even do is open up some space in the middle of that super, just in case the queen wants to lay more. When they start drawing, which they're going to with all of the energy that's coming in from nature, she's going to have opportunities to maybe lay more, and I want to allow for all that. So I'm going to increase the space basically, but not do anything else. And this was so clean. Did not see a single beetle. I saw potentially a little beetle trap they had made, but incredibly clean. And I think that's because I hadn't visited it. So last time I visited the hive was at the end of May, so June, first week of June. June 7th I left, and I checked them all before that. Then I checked this hive once in August, and now we are mid-September, and it's getting checked a second. It's like once a month. So now I got more to watch because we're on the edge of the flow, but just how little, you know, the summertime they had to, it was all on their own to work out the beetles and work out the mites and figure out how to do it themselves. So this hive is not on a screened bottom board. It's got a solid bottom board. I go real slow here because they get pinched between the frames. And if you take your time, and sometimes you have to back up. There we go. You see him going after that finger? That was because I had one pinned, and then I unpinned it, and so it was expressing its frustration. So yeah, the frame rest, keep the bees close. It just keeps the whole colony more calm because they are all one organism. Imagine like how unnerving it would be to have your arm disconnected from your body and have to like go, oh man, it's missing. There's this cool collective consciousness stuff. So not a great pattern, not a lot of bees outside, which is interesting. Like the activity at the entrance was lower. For this is decent coverage, and this is a one box, you know, colony. This is just a deep. So that's the other thing. Having in Houston, because we're more mild or moderate, having a 2-box colony, which is what you need like up north with the hard winters, you need a queen laying in a bottom box and a second box. So you need a lot more bees to be able to draw in. We can stay a little smaller in our colonies, and maybe it's something that the bees do to help them get through the mites or the beetles, or who knows. Oh, hey Jordan, will you grab the hive rest, the metal thing? Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Alright, and I'm going to try and not smash any bees. I usually do this sort of like hover at that 1/4 inch. And then slowly. I did not hear any crunches. And then, so yeah, solid bottom board. Oh, this is a cool thing. It's a beetle shim, and this is the only colony I have that has it. It's basically that little edge that we see on the outside is also on the inside, so when they push the beetles down, it's harder for them to climb back up. Not sure how effective it is because I don't have a lot of iterations. And then the top entrance, so this is my lid. It gives them a lot of airspace up above, and I made these because I was using a little a sheet of like hardy board kind of thing, so for dead airspace above, but I got rid of the board because it wasn't really helping. You know, like if I had to put a beetle blaster in or a pollen patty, you know, it couldn't really go underneath. It created a beetle habitat. That was the bigger reason. So I still have the airspace, and now it's this cool thing where quite a few times having this extra space on top of the colony has helped me because it's given them space to build to let me know how crowded they are. So I don't even have to go in as much. If I see them building comb like this up in the lid, well, I know they're ready to expand and I can add space. And so it's almost like I can get to go in there even less, which is where I'm at philosophy-wise with bees. It's just, you know, yes, you got to go in and make sure they're on frames, but I had a colony where I didn't go in for a whole year, and they ended up being on the frames even better than they were when I got them. I got them cross-combed with like comb that looked like this, I swear, after they did it themselves. It was eerie. And so I thought, hey, you know, there's something there. So that's my system. Now it's time to prepare the frames. I'm foundationless. I basically just give them the little bead of wax at the top for them to draw in the medium super that's going to go on here. So yeah, that's one of the colonies here at Inwood Eden, and hopefully you found that helpful and informative for, I don't know, Houston beekeeping. And I love to connect with other Houston beekeepers for sure. So if you see this video and want to connect with me, please reach out and we can learn from each other.